So my name is Erik. I work here in Oslo as a consultant at the Beck Consulting. It's quite intimidating for me to be on this stage today because for most of my career I've been working with JavaScript, large web-based front ends with React. When that came out, before that, Backbone, jQuery, Redux, and some Elm. And here I am today talking partly about a cross-platform JavaScript-based mobile tool, which I have this thought that most mobile developers hate because it's not as good as native, right? So today I'm sharing a story from my latest project where we are using React Native, but it won't be a how-to about React Native. It's as much about people, about teamwork, about process, and how to write features fast. So, how many of you have this app on your phone? Quite a lot of people. So this is NSB, that's the Norwegian State Railway Company. So since January of last year, I've been working on this app along with a lot of other people. And it sells over 1 million train tickets every year for over 1 billion Norwegian kroners. Has over 2 million downloads in the app stores, so it has quite a lot of volume. And these past 2 years, and the reason I'm standing here today is because it's been the most insane roller coaster ride. It's been really learningful, it's been really stressful, really intense. It has had a lot of downs and ups, but most of all, it's been really fun. And that's why I would like to share this experience with you. So, coming from mostly working with web front ends, entering this team, starting to learn more mobile stuff, I've also learned a lot of other things, like there's a big difference between small dogs and large dogs. And that's because there's tickets for small dogs below 40 centimeters, and there's other tickets for large dogs. And there's different rules for which carriages you can join. There's separate trains that you can't bring your pet to because they're open to hyper-allergic people, etc. We've gotten some good reviews, although very short, like 5 stars, good app. And we've gotten some really bad reviews, like 2 stars, this app is slowly like hell. Maybe it's a good idea to change the programmers. This is a fun thing to see when you go to work in the morning. But most importantly, we've learned to move faster as a team. And that's part of what we've been ordered to do, is just prepare to move faster and faster. And the reason for this is something happening in the political landscape of Norway for the past years. So those of you living in Norway might have read about what's called Jernbanereformen, which is the Norwegian railway reform. So NSB used to have full monopoly on all of the rail distances in Norway, so they controlled everything. Now the new government has decided that you're going to have to bid on separate distances. So recently a UK-based company won the train stretch from Oslo to Kristiansand. So NSB is kind of in a totally new situation. Like since 1860 something, they've been the state-bound railway company, and now suddenly they have competition. So NSB is looking to become a new and different company. So it is not just about trains anymore, but they realize that in the future it's also going to be just as much about other means of transportation. So NSB is less and less about trains, but more and more about transportation. And a good example of how they intend to do that is that recently they bought 250 electrical cars from this Copenhagen-based company. So it's like the Oslo city bike, where you can rent the bike, drop it off at one of the hotspots, and then just pay for the trip or have like a season ticket. Similarly, you can now rent one of these bybil, or the city cars, and drive it wherever you want to go inside the Ring 3 in Oslo. It's a pretty cool concept. And there's these areas where you can charge the cars and you can drop them off on free parking and such. So that's just one of the areas where NSB is expanding. So I'm showing you this to try to put you in the right context of what NSB was and what it's going to be in the future. So what we know is that we don't know what's happening in the future. So we're basically optimizing for speed and flexibility. We have to be ready to handle whatever comes our way in a year or 2 years or 5 years. So one of those steps I'm going to share with you. So this is a story of what we call Shiva Debt, which translates to cloud tickets or cloud ticketing. It's one of the largest and most complex projects I've done in my career. And I'm going to try to summarize one of the most important things we've learned through that process. in 9 different steps. So let's rewind a couple of years. Sometime in 2011, NSB launches one of the first means of e-ticketing in Norway, where you can actually buy and show your ticket for inspection all on your phone. And back then, this was really like front-page news. So this is one of the business-focused newspapers in Norway, and that was like a really big article. And you might remember the really old look of iOS back then. And you remember this was just a couple of years after it was even possible developing iOS apps. So the APIs, the method of developing, everything was just so ancient compared to today. So when I entered, the apps had undergone several facelifts by several different developers in different companies. And of course, an app that has lived for this long and served that many users and also that has that many features will have to develop some kind of technical debt over time. It's almost impossible to manage that code base in a perfect way. So in September 2018, we've done quite a few more jumps. And one of the first steps on the road there started sometime before I joined the project with what was called Project Material Design. So that was about rewriting the Android app basically from scratch in the new style of material design. Of course, rewriting the app from scratch is a huge project. So my gut reaction is that I want to do it incrementally and develop in a more agile way. But it was begun as like a big boom kind of project. And in one way, how can you blame them? Because how are you going to do that incrementally when you have a huge app, so many features, old code base, old API levels, kind of hard to work with. And the scope is just, this is like 1/5 of all of the different screens in the app. One thing it's kind of hard to realize before you start working with train apps or transportation apps is the vast amount of different tickets. So there's like one-way tickets, return tickets, senior citizen tickets, dogs over and under 40 centimeters tickets, bicycle tickets. There's separate tickets on when you have like a night train with a sleeping compartment, etc., etc. I think it amounts to 20-something different kinds of tickets. And all of those have their separate handling and separate logic in the app. So the domain of trains is really surprisingly complicated, with the raw data being really chaotic. So let's say you have a one-way ticket, and the field to check if a ticket expires on a certain time is expires at. So you check that one. But if it's a period ticket or a season ticket, you check a different field. Or if it's a two-way ticket, it's a completely different data model. So you can imagine the JSON you get from the server that has to cover all of the different types of tickets. And then working with that in a nice way in the app, really hard. Also, there's a lot of logic in the apps because you don't want people to fraud the system. Let's say you do like a system backup from an old backup on your phone. You don't want the ticket to be available on both phones, right? And all sorts of other mechanisms. So there's really a lot of logic. So this is what we call the mobile being a ticket carrier. There's something, a verb called to ticket something. It's basically the equivalent of like cutting the ticket in two, so it's used, right? So you have to do that in a digital way. And lastly, the code base was old, it's really hard to work with. But I started thinking, why are we doing this? I mean, at the end of this project, we'll have rewritten just the Android app, not the iOS app. The data we're working with is still really hard to handle. So the next time we're doing a new feature is just as hard. So we will just have brute forced our way through the problem instead of trying to solve it in a smart way. So this leads me to the first huge realization at some point, that we were making the wrong thing. We were solving the wrong problem. So this is really about the art of knowing when to scope up, because most often it's the other way around. You need to scope down. So I hope you all know the skateboard model. The keynote this morning referred it as well. So if the client is asking for a car, don't give them just one wheel and then another wheel, and then at the fourth stage it works. Just give them something that solves the same problem but in a much simpler way, and then just add on incrementally instead. But here that was not possible, because what we actually needed to go one step up in order to solve a problem that would give us long-term effects and make life easier for us 1 year ahead, 2 years ahead, 5 years ahead. So in order to fully demonstrate this, I have to talk a little bit about our architecture. So when NSB got lost their monopoly, they formed a new company called Entur, which is one trip. That's the translation. So it's a really funny name in a way. So they're going to handle all the, when does the train depart? How many tickets are left? Is this train late? What's the cheapest ticket on this train? All of that stuff is going to be handled by this company because NSB might be just one of several operators in the future. So NSB can't handle all of that stuff anymore. So for the Norwegians here, NSB is like SAS, and Entur is like Avinor. So it's operator neutral. So our apps speak to our own backend, like a backend for frontend, which we call the MSL, or the mobile service layer, and they talk to like the proper backends at Entur. It has the tickets, they have all the raw data. So Entur will know that ticket A is ticketed to John's iPhone. That means that that ticket can't be ticketed again. You can't get it printed as a PDF on your email because you can print as many copies of that as you want, right? So you'd break the one ticket, one person mechanism. And the phone would have lots of logic, lots of crypto in order to ensure the ticket. So it's really, really heavy setup. So we started thinking, how would we like this to be? What would be easier? Well, we would like to be able to form our own ticket data and be able to decide where each ticket is ticketed to control that logic ourselves. So let's just say that this would be our dream scenario. So we create our own backend to handle all of that ticket stuff and just add it as a man in the middle or a proxy to the proper backends. Then we can have all the tickets in our own database, and we can handle that ticket A is ticketed to John's iPhone. And Entur wouldn't have to deal with that problem anymore. Well, they would, but all of the tickets would just be ticketed to Shiva Debt, or the cloud ticketing service. And this has some very big advantages, because now we can ticket the tickets ourselves and model the data ourselves. So we can have a separate data structure for all of the different types of tickets. And previously, all tickets would be associated with an order. So if you ordered like a really complex order, like 20 tickets, some of them have different to and from stations, some of them are return tickets, some of them are not, some of them have pets with them, some of them have a bike with them. Imagine the JSON structure modeling that one order with 20 tickets of different types, etc. Really, really hard to work with. So now we just said that, okay, we'll just deal with single tickets. So if you have this big order, we'll just cut it into 20 separate tickets and give that to the app. So the app knows to handle this kind of ticket, etc. Also, we can just do a query with SQL to find out how many period tickets do we have currently on Oslo-Gjøvik, instead of having to do an inquiry through email. And lastly, we have all of the logic related to tickets on our site, so that enables us to write new innovative features, such as giving the customer automatically the best ticket type for you. Let's say you're here in Norway for the first time visiting Mobile Era. You buy like a 1-hour ticket with the Ruter, the local tram, and then you do the same thing in the same evening and one thing the morning after. Then we can just tell you that, hey, we just turned it into a 24-hour ticket for you because it's cheaper. There you go, it's fixed, right? It's a really nice thing to be able to do. Also, being able to transfer your ticket between your devices. Let's say you want to go fishing, and suddenly your season ticket, that's 365 days. It's on the bottom of some salmon fishing river, right? So the ticket is gone. So you'd like to transfer that. So Entur can have some rules for that, but basically that's up to NSB to decide. So now we can do that ourselves. We can say that, okay, you can transfer your ticket, but there's a limit of like 3 times per year, or 4, or 5. It's up to us. It wasn't in the past. Also, you can say that we would like to create a service where you can transfer your ticket for just a night, so your wife can use your ticket to go to the store or something like that. We haven't yet, but we could, because now we have the power to do that. So this new ticketing cloud service really simplifies the development, but there's one big thing that remains. And that is, of course, one of the biggest challenges with mobile development, and that is you have to write it once for iOS and once for Android. And that could be quite easy if you have a large team with experienced iOS developers and experienced Android developers. And also if you have a clean code base without lots of old code and not 2 million users screaming that they need this feature or that feature, or I hate you, the train is delayed, etc. And guess what? We don't. So we have a lot of people who are experienced with JavaScript, React. So basically, could be that not native technology was the right choice for us. So that leads me to point number 2. choosing the right technology for your project. So note that this is not choosing React Native or not choosing mobile native technology, but choosing what's right for your situation. So it's all about trade-offs, right? So of course we started looking at React Native. Is it mature enough? Does it work? Is it only usable for pet projects or what? So our dream situation was that all team members can to a much larger degree work on both platforms. Because we had one really experienced iOS developer and one somewhat experienced Android developer, but the rest knew like a little bit both, but not too much. So we'd like a really efficient dev workflow with a short feedback loop. So whenever you write some changes, you want to be able to test that really quick, as there's nothing more detrimental to developer experience than the long feedback flow. Lastly, be able to reuse some code across both platforms would be really nice as well. And one thing that's not on here is that we don't have a small app with just a limited feature set that we want to be really, really awesome in terms of user experience. We have like a huge feature set, and we can accept the user experience being good but not awesome, right? And that's a big difference between some apps. So React Native gives us most of this. Everyone knows at least some part of JavaScript to remove a lot of the language and platform barriers. Of course, we have to write some native code, and still not everyone on the team can do that like, perfectly. But that's like 5% of the code now as opposed to 100%. The developer workflow is really, really pleasant when you use React. I still remember the first time I really understood React back in 2014 and just how that way of building components and just using the patterns from functional programming really made your day easier. So I urge all of you who haven't tried React just to go try it out, because it's such a great piece of technology. And also, hot reloading makes our day a lot easier. And lastly, of course, being able to write at least some parts of the code just once instead of twice is really helpful. It's not like you can write it once and not write any adaptation to the different platforms. That's just not the way it works. But I'd say we save around 40–45% of the work, and then just do the custom-made customizations for the different platforms. So let me show you an example of the hot reloading. You can go in the code and change the color, and just the app would just magically update right in front of you instantly. There's no recompiling, building, deploying to the simulator. It's just change the code, boom, it's there. And showing this to the experienced iOS developer on the team, he was just sold. He spent his entire evening playing with React Native after the first time we just discussed maybe using it. That's just how powerful this mechanism is. When we have a lot of screens to make with a lot of information, like you can have all this stuff, these different train stretches with 1 leg, 2 legs, 3 legs, one transfer to bus. It can be delayed, it can be cancelled. The train that had your night carriage could not be able to be on the train, so your night carriage isn't there, so you're transferred to a normal seat instead of a sleeper compartment. There's so many things, and just being able to style this and mock this up and create it really fast with the hot reloading, as opposed to having to rebuild it, it's just a huge win. When you have a lot of different screens to make, that's a matter of scale. Also, we have a tab bar based app, so we could basically first replace this one, which was the scope of the Shiva Debt project. Now, at this point, we have 3 of the tabs rewritten partly or in full to React Native, while some of them remain old native code. Also, this is the list of departures. So what we can do is that whenever you click on some greenfield departures with no deviations, no cancellations, it's just happy day, then we can send you to the new code, because we've written that in React Native yet, but we have not covered when it's delayed. So we can send you to the old flow. So we can just send you to the old stuff for the things that we haven't handled yet, and send you to the new stuff for the simple scenarios, and just test that. Does it work? Is the font big enough? Does the technology work? How does the A/B testing tool work? We get answers to all of this without having to rewrite the entire thing. So we've basically chosen the big task. We've scoped up, but we just need to get it done. And how do we go about doing that? We've painted the picture, but how do we actually get there? So that brings us to the other side of the scoping thing. Basically, scoping out everything that is not essential. How much can we possibly cut while still providing most of the value to the users? Every feature or every project has some parts that are not really essential. and maybe contribute a large part of the work. So I like to say that sushi chefs and software developers have in common that a big knife is a really great tool. And that, of course, that's metaphorically, because I'm speaking about the fine art of shaping tasks in such a way that you maximize the value for the user while minimizing the effort needed from developers, but without sacrificing code quality. I mean, said in a simpler way, it's about making smart choices, right? So if you know that you can't create the skateboard, you have to actually scope up, as we have done. We're not going to only rewrite the Android app, we're going to write just the ticket part in Android and iOS with React Native, and write a backend as well. So we really have a huge scope creep. But when we first do that, we can recognize that a car isn't just a car. We can try to make the simplest possible car, right? So let me give you some examples of choices we made. So at some point we were trying out React Native, and the very first thing we did was to create this push notification subscription. So you could say that when I take a train from Asker to Oslo every Monday and Wednesday between 7:30 and 8. So please give me push notifications if those trains are delayed or canceled. So we needed a GUI, and somewhere to put that. So we rewrote the favorites view, where you can put your favorite trains and see when they depart from the station. So my good friend Espen at the team, he's really awesome with knife. He's the best. I think he'd make a really good sushi chef. So he said that, what about if we just put in this thing, like the 3 next departures, because that was not a part of the original plan, and just cut these 2 from the first release. That doesn't deliver what we wanted to do. We want to create a push notification service, but still, this is one large step in the same direction. Because now, we can get this thing out, and we can check, is the new font working? Is the font size big enough? Is the contrast okay for everyone with some vision impairment? Does React Native work? How does having a JavaScript bundle inside of the app in production work? Share one version number for the native code, one version number for the JavaScript code. How does all of that work? By doing this, we simplify what we do in the first release and reduce our risk, basically. So in the next release, of course, we'd add this, but then we'd know the answers to all of those other questions. Similarly, with Shiva Debt, we realized that 95% are a user with just one ticket, either one season ticket or a one-way ticket. And maybe much less than 5% are really complex orders. So let's just make it really good for those first. So, okay, if you do buy 20 tickets for your large family to go to the cabin in Christmas, okay, you'd get 20 tickets, and that's a bit cumbersome. But it works, right? And we'd save 3 months. Similarly, there are some shortcuts to buying a zone extension ticket, renewing your season ticket, or adding your ticket to the calendar. How many people just uses this? How important are they? Can we live without them for like 2 weeks? We wanted to try that. So we just scoped that out from the first release, and we actually didn't hear anyone missing these, but a lot of people missing these. So we could just make that and get it out 2 days after we actually verified our huge release with all of the risk. Which brings me to point number 4. When you want to have continuous delivery, you also need to have continuous design. Because when I started working in the industry, designers, I rarely met them. They just sent me a Dropbox file. Here's the sketches, just make it like this. Okay, thanks, bye. Right? Never heard from them. So the old way is that the designers make the sketches. They just basically give me the faucet, like how it's supposed to be, and I make it, and we're happy. Nowadays, we'd like to work in a much more agile fashion. So the designers would basically just prototype something real fast. Could it work something like this? And we'd actually write that in React Native in just a few hours, and just the buttons wouldn't work, there'd be no connection to the backend service, we'd just mock it out. But still, we'd get it on a device and just feel it. Does it feel nice? Is the important information landing below the fold? Is it weird to have the button on the sub page instead of on the front page? And those kind of questions. And then go back to designing some more, coding some more, and just really iterating perhaps several times in a day instead of doing the handover thing. So when we were finishing the project, we decided that, oh, we need to have a new landing page that says that, okay, this is what your ticket page looks like now, and it's empty because you don't have a ticket. And if you need to, if you have a ticket but it's not here, you can pull to refresh. So this thing came about in one day with 3 iterations of design, prototyping, coding, testing, etc. And we actually had it in production at the end of the day because it was after the initial release, and we released it on Android first, so you could just get it out. That was really that was one of the greatest moments of me realizing how amazing it is to work like this. Number 5, we're all product developers. At some point, it became evident to me that the designer was really afraid that things might turn out badly, that it wouldn't look nice, and that was her fault. And to me, it was kind of obvious that even though we have different specializations and backgrounds, like designer, technologist, or business developer, we're all in it together, and we're all trying to make a product or a service together. So I basically said, who's to blame if there's a bug? Is that the developers? If the design ends up being really ugly? If it doesn't perfectly solve the customer demand? That's everyone's fault. I mean, that's the team's task to solve that. And it doesn't mean that if the design doesn't work, that's the designer's fault. Everyone in the team should help. Of course, some of us have different specializations and better odds at finding like the optimal solutions, but we all have to help each other to get there. And that also means that who will go out to perform user testing for a new feature? So we went out to the Oslo Central Station a couple of times during this process, and we just sent the entire team. There's no need to only send the UX person and then have that person come back with like a report. Please read this about how your button worked or how many people found your feature. And instead of just having that developer go out and see how it worked. So you can imagine the motivation for that developer who made something and determined that, oh, it didn't work, right? And then maybe if that developer doesn't immediately realize how to solve it, you can go ask the UX person who has a lot more experience. But sometimes also you as a developer can solve some of the simpler issues. Yeah. This reminds me of a story about the dictator in North Korea, where the previous one, whenever a rocket launch failed, he would just shoot the scientist and say, "You suck, next." So how does it feel to be the next one? How afraid would you be of actually failing? As opposed to the current guy in charge who would say, "Okay, that sucked, but better luck next time. How can we fix it? How can we help you?" Right? So there's a lot of things to say about that guy, but actually in that regard, I think he got something right. So this is another pet peeve of mine. Some people laugh at this, and that's fine, but I think it's really something to think about. We used to sit like this. So we would sit face to face across a large desk. So whenever this person wanted to talk to this person, it would most likely happen over Slack or some sort of IM service, not the face-to-face. But whenever we did this, we just moved the desks. We had so much more communication among the people in the team. And that helped us realize so many discussions that we otherwise wouldn't have taken that ended up making some decisions even better in terms of design or tech or how does this work, onboarding people, etc. Along the same lines, previously we were sitting like this, and there was a separate island with 4 desks, and that was the designers. So if you needed something, we'd go to them and they'd take the order and make it and send it, right? So that's the old way. So we just figured, okay, how about we reduce the number of developers on this thing from 6 to 5, and we just get the designer working on it right in the middle of us. And that also changed something with the dynamics, because then whenever you are unclear about something or want to just play ball about should this thing be on this page or this page, you just do the discussion in the team. And that's basically the image I showed you earlier about sitting on the desk, actually trying the app together. That would happen so much more often when we did this. And also just taking those sketches, and instead of removing them from like the scary cave of sketches inside of whatever tool the designer is using that we never opened or know about, but just whenever a sketch was updated, we'd actually use an integration to make it appear in Slack. And that would spawn some discussions, like could we change this text to this text from the product owner? So instead of this discussion waiting until some sort of design critique or like demo, we just get it at the very same second we make the first draft. And then this backend guy could say that we don't have that text right now, so we can't change it, but we'd make a task for it and do it in the next release. And okay, cool. So that takes maybe a couple of minutes for all the parts involved. We get a really important decision made much earlier in the process. And the same thing when it goes to your favorite Agile board. We use Trello, but how many of you have been in a project where the Agile board is just a complete mess? Okay, that's pretty much most of you. So in this project, we started to become more and more strict. Like if a task is supposed to be done for the next few releases, then why is it here? Just delete it or move it to some other board. And what if nobody knows what a card is about? Even the person who made it, that obviously it's not important. If it's important, it will resurface. So just get it away. It's just noise. And what if a card has a bad description? Then make it better, or find the person who made it and make them describe it so that the developer or whoever needs to read it actually understand what it's about. I've seen so many people at stand-ups just looking at the board and not realizing what any of the tasks mean except their own, which nobody else knows what it's about. Right? It's a bit exaggerated, but still there's some truth in there. So just having a really strong relationship to what your Agile board is supposed to do for your team, and then see what helps us achieve that and what is in the way. So we'll also just create new lists whenever we see that, okay, before we can do this release, there's just these few tasks left. Then let's not keep those tasks at the end of a large list, but just make a new one, just remaining before 10% release on Android. And just treat the Agile board as a really agile tool. So all of these things I've been talking about is just we iterate, we learn more, we produce, but at some point we've been doing this for a couple of months and we actually have to start thinking about when would we be done. So I haven't got a really good English translation for this, but krigsråd is a Norwegian word that basically is like a war council when you sit down in terms of war and discuss with the generals what are we supposed to do to handle this problem. So this is, after a long period of crunch mode, we need to just stop for a moment and set eyes on the target to see, to maybe set a date. So it's basically asking these questions. What are we working on right now? Okay, it's Shiva Debt, it's the ticket pages on iOS and Android with React Native. But actually, what sub-features are we doing? Which features are essential, and which ones can we scope out? And when can we have that done? Can we set kind of a really ambitious date and see how much can we get out by that date? And get the team motivated by that. So we sat down and backtracked from Christmas because we all wanted to have a Christmas vacation. And so how much time do we actually have? How much can we get done in that time? The keynote earlier today said that you can have a feature-driven development or a date-driven development, but not both. But I would like to challenge that and say you can have both, but then you can't have a fixed scope. You'd have to actually dare to cut everything that's not essential to your feature. Of course, sometimes that's not possible, but I would say that in a lot of times you can actually just cut your task in such a way that you will get it done by a certain date. And the more ambitious that date is, of course, the poorer your feature will be. So we figured that, okay, in order to get this out by Christmas and have a comfortable schedule, we'll have to have the backend in production to at least 1% of the traffic by November 13th. And that's because all of the tickets being sold after we release this will actually be stored in our ticket database. But all of the tickets that were sold before that, we wouldn't know about them. So that would be sort of a problem. We'll have to specially handle that whenever an app with a new version asks for, hey, where's my ticket? And we say, hey, you don't have a ticket, because it was bought before this new backend went to service. So we need to have this in production for quite some time before we could ship the apps. And then we hopefully could scale that to 100%, removing any bugs within a week's time. We didn't know if that was possible, but we knew that it could be possible, and that makes it fun to try, right? That creates something in us that if we succeed with this, that feels really good, then we can be proud about it, instead of just, it's done when it's done, right? And then, day after, we should be able to release to Android for just 1%. So that should be safe. It's just 1%, right? And then, a couple of days later, to 10%. And then, just really setting off, dedicating 2 weeks to fixing bugs and really having a comfortable schedule to fix any potential problems, because this is really huge. It's like 500,000 people having their ticket there. And when their trains are delayed almost every other day, they don't have that much built up tolerance for error from their favorite app. And of course, by December 22, that's a Friday before Christmas, we should be done. And if not, there's no Christmas vacation. And that's also some sort of motivation. And the best part about this is that it's really a bit ambitious. Like, if we can do this, I will be really proud about this. I will tell this to my friends, and I will feel really good about it. And then there's this guy who we never heard about, but we heard about his statement, and that is, no plan survives first contact with the enemy, right? And at this point, we're also realizing that there's a lot of things that can go awfully wrong. And that's realization number 7, that something will go wrong. It's just, I can promise you that, something will go wrong. But what's our plan B? That's the most important part. So we shouldn't fear errors, but we should instead fear not discovering them or not learning from them. But how do you fix bugs fast in an app world where the App Store could potentially take a lot of time? I mean, in recent times it's a lot quicker than this, but still, when you need it the most, I'm pretty sure Apple would take a few extra days to review your app. Then, of course, Android to the rescue. Being able to release, if not instantly, then pretty quickly, is really important. So we always release on Android first. And we needed a method to get feedback from the users. So instead of just going to Intercom or some really fancy tool, most of them are really based around two-way chats. And when you have 1 million travelers really upset about their train being delayed, it's not a good way to have a two-way chat where they can expect you to be able to answer them, because we are IT people. We're not working with the deviations in the train traffic. So we just put them a really simple email address and a long message saying that, oh, if you need to refund your ticket, if there's a problem with the train, sorry, we're not them, please call the service desk. And also when you email that address, you get a long auto reply saying exactly that, but really thanks you so much for your feedback. So we received 1,500 emails in just a few weeks, sent them all to a Trello board, and then start to aggregate up what people are annoyed with, wants fixed, or features that they want. So it also serves as a tool to help us plan what should we do next in the app. But also, oh my god, you broke the add to calendar button, and then, maybe that's a bit more important after all, right? And some days you just simply get praise in that email. So we can start the day with, hi, I think the new design is fantastic. It's really well planned out, and it's obvious that you followed how, as travelers, use the app. And that when you can start your workday by reading that mail, it's going to be a really nice day, and you see the team is just really happy. Of course, you have some mails on the other end of the scale as well, but let's not talk about those. And sometimes, as I said, something will go wrong. So sometime we broke the Today widget, the widget when you scroll left on your iOS home screen, and we had one release simply to fix that bug. And in some way, we just failed miserably. We were able to fix that bug, but we didn't see that we had a bug when you clicked it and you opened the app and the deep link didn't work. It crashed the app. Okay, how are we going to get out of that? So we just basically, in the next release that actually fixed the thing, just flat out said that we're really embarrassed. We can't promise you that we'll never make mistakes. That was really bad of us. But we can, however, promise you to care, and that we'll work relentlessly to give you the best possible experience. And this was just the day after the other bug. So sorry, very sorry. Really embarrassing. But the day after, someone said that, I would say I really appreciate these kinds of release notes instead of just bug fixes, as we've done so many times and stopped doing now, thankfully. So this is also a nice way to just handle that. Whenever you make a mistake, just acknowledge it and say you're sorry, and just find out how can we not do that again. Like the recent GitHub error last week, right? We're writing a good post-mortem, not throwing someone under the bus, but just say, that was bad, we'll try to make sure it doesn't happen again. And of course, we haven't got this set up, but code push, when you use React Native, sounds like a dreamland to me. So code push is when you can actually just release new versions of the JavaScript code, circumventing the App Store and the Play Store. So you can basically just push a button like you can with a web app, and boom, your code is out. So then my tolerance for shipping a release will be a lot higher. I just ship it and just see in production is something wrong, fixing it, releasing a new thing, and then to me this is really the future of working with apps. We're approaching the end of the talk. Number 8 is about making sure nothing happens in production without you knowing about it. Then you will sleep a lot better that way. So that means, for example, having good monitoring on the server side. So whenever you release a new app, just check for errors and that version number, and as long as that is an empty view, you're quite happy. And also having good logs of everything. Like people trying to fool or tamper with the clock or the current time on your phone to make a previously expired ticket valid again, right? Instead of making a lot of security measures up front to hinder people doing that and extend the time of our already really big project, we could just skip that and just see, hey, are people actually doing it? Whenever you open your app, we're sending that time to us to see if you're tampered with it. And whenever someone did and it started becoming a problem, we could fix it reactively instead of up front trying to solve every conceivable problem. That's also a little trick in order to get the most out of your time before a big release. And it's fun to talk about things that go well, but it's also almost even more fun to talk about things that didn't go well. So when you buy a ticket in our app, it's possible to log in during a purchase, right? It's really annoying when you're trying to buy something, and then you have to log in, and then your shopping cart is empty, right? It didn't keep all your state. So you can log in there. We forgot that when you do this, they stored the user ID in a different location, and there was some really funky code doing that. So that meant that whenever you go to the ticket page, we try to get the tickets for no user, right? So that's obviously not right. So suddenly this thing was in production, and everyone who was not logged in through the booking flow, and then went to the tickets page, didn't get their ticket. And when people buy something and don't get what they bought, they're really, really upset. So what we had to do here is that whenever we get a request to the server saying that, please give me all the tickets for this user, and there's no user ID there, we just send you a fake ticket with a description, could not fit your tickets, please open your profile and verify that you are logged in. Because once you clicked on the profile tab, it would read from that separate location and user ID was set again, right? So this was a canceled ticket, like just fake data, could not fetch your tickets, I'm sorry. And whenever you refresh, this would disappear because then your user ID would be set. So we could tell everyone how to fix the problem from the backend. So in a lot of situations, you can just do this as well to avoid those pesky bugs. But there's of course one that did get away that we wasn't able to fix. Let's say you buy a ticket without logging in on the web page, and then you use something called a pickup code or a reference code to download the ticket to the app. And then you update the app from before the new Shiva Debt version to the new, because that would wipe the local database on the phone. And we wouldn't have that ticket in our database because you didn't buy it logged in, so we can't associate it with you. Ticket is gone. So this one we just had to bite in the sour apple, as we say in Norway, and just make those people call customer support, because they had the record of them using the pickup code and could actually associate the ticket and the problem was fixed. But a couple of hundred people actually had to do that, so that's basically the biggest blooper we had during the whole project. And to me, it's bad, but it's livable. We can live with that. So this is the last and final learning we had. Like when we've been working for this with a team of 5 or 6 people for 4 months, and we're going to release it to the people and get our updates safely out without making the front page news, because that happens. Whenever we make some big mistake, it's front page news, and that's not fun. So, I mean, I guess this is not very big news to people who are working with mobile and are used to the release flow of app stores, but this is nonetheless is how we did it. We first went out to 1% on Android, and then took 2 days to realize that 1% of all the users on Android, that's really not a lot of people. Because among those 1%, you're actually relying on them updating the app within those 2 days, and actually buying a ticket that's going to be used within those 2 days, not for going home to Christmas a week later, and actually opening the app, and actually potentially revealing some bug that you didn't find yourself. And that number is just not big enough to be helpful. So we had to scale up to 5% and then later to 30% to actually find the bugs that were there. So we had a really long period to fix those bugs and make sure we just didn't do that in a like hasteful and error-prone way, but actually take our time to think through that. We redid some of the architectural parts to make sure it went okay. Up to 30% on Android, and then of course the App Store said that your app is rejected because it doesn't work without internet, but, except it does. So I don't understand how they managed to get the result. So we just sent in the exact same binary, and it worked. And that's the one in the production today. So, you know, so a week before Christmas it was out, and it was just to us an incredible realization that it was actually, that we actually did this. There were some points there where we didn't think it would be possible. But what we did is that we really gained experience in moving faster as a team. And the result and what we did is somewhat interesting, but the most interesting parts are how we have learned to make stuff faster and work together and become happier as a team. So after this release, we've continued to work by redoing the booking tab, which is the leftmost tab where you buy all your tickets. And it used to be like a 15-step rocket with just way too many clicks, way too many steps, too many options. So we started by rewriting just the front page to give you smarter aliases, so you could say airport and it would find Oslo Airport Gardermoen and stuff like that, which we would expect from any app in 2018. And then it would send you to the old version of this one. This is the new, and then send you to then redo that one and send you to the older version of this one, etc., and just eat our way one step at a time. And then we came to the departures list. As I told you earlier, you click on one, you go to the old flow. You click on another, you go to the new flow. So we try to make those look somewhat alike, so it's not too confusing for the users, but it will be somewhat confusing for the users in some transitional period, and that sucks. But it's the price we pay to be able to get this done in like a year and not 3 years, because it's really a tight lump of stuff. So I'd like to try to summarize one of the most important things we learned. So to me, do we have the right scope? Are we solving the right problem? Will solving this problem make our future look a lot brighter? Will it make things easier to make in the future? Like when we have the new ticket cloud service, things will be a lot simpler. But okay, with the new Android app, it's somewhat simpler because the Android parts will be simpler, but the data we have is still difficult. So ideally, all the tasks will have long-term effects on the team. But when we chose that part, we had to actually scope down to realize it in production. So sometimes you need to scope up to get the long-term effects, but as always, you need to scope down to actually get it done and attempt to focus on what's most important, so you don't use a lot of time on things that people don't want. I mean, startups are really the best example of this. If you're a startup and you spend time on things that are not the most important thing to your business proposal, you fail, right? But in large companies, you can do that a lot of times and just not fail, but just make less money and maybe fail in the long term. And your technology should work for you, not against you. So I guess for some teams, this is about native technology because those advantages are what you need in that team. In other teams, that's cross-platform technology. And for us, it's been really nice using React Native because since we're creating so many different screens and there's so many features, it's a really feature-heavy app. It's nice to have the hot reloading, being able to work fast, and also being a large team, being able to swap members going from Android to iOS, and just everyone can work on everything is really a big deal. And also being able to access the JS ecosystem. Okay, we need a complex calendar. Hey, let's see what's on NPM. Let's pull that thing in and it works. Lastly, I would really love to be able to use Code Push, but we're not there yet because at the moment we have 3 apps. It's the old native Android app, the old native iOS app, and it's the React Native app. Ideally, when they're in one folder structure and they're set up in a different way, it's easier or it's possible to adopt the Code Push, but right now it's just too much work for us. The last thing, facilitate cross-disciplinary ownership and collaboration. So that's a really long, difficult sentence, but it's basically just doing those small things that makes it easier to do the right things in your team. So that's like, that's like how do you organize your Agile board? How can you remove friction? How can you think about how you sit in order to enable collaboration? Make sure your stand-ups actually help you build good feedback loops and talk to your users. But most importantly, it's demanding, but it's also very effective and very fun. I think everyone on the team, I know that everyone on the team sometime during last fall said that this is the most fun I've had at work during my whole career. And that really is something, because people in our industry are smart people. If you give them what they need to grow and prosper, they will do amazing things. But have them work with JSF or old terrible technology or things that doesn't work with you, and it won't become good. So I guess the biggest, the thing that's been the most fun for me is the fact that sometimes we get good reviews, we can get terrible reviews, but still this just means that I'm in direct contact with my users, and if I do something bad, they will tell me immediately, and that will make me think twice about every choice I make. And whenever I have a feature that I feel that this will be really good, I'm really looking forward to give this to the users, and then just getting that feedback afterwards, and really telling if it was good or not. It's an incredible feeling as a developer, and I hope everyone finds a way to work in that manner, because it's so rewarding as a IT person. So that's basically what I wanted to talk about today. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to follow me on Twitter. Let's do questions. Let's do questions up here if anyone has any questions, so we don't bother everyone else. And also, please approach me at the after party today if you'd like to talk about any of the things I've been talking about. I'd love to talk with you. So thanks.